So thanks, Suresh and Samir. And I think that sort of rounds up the tabletop exercise. I think this will be probably the first of other tabletop exercises to follow whenever we do cybersecurity programs. Anyway, welcome to the Kiran Karnik here as well. So, well, we will start now with the proper sessions. I think Gunjal Shroff, good morning to you. I think you've prepared for this particular session, which
Yes,
looks
sir.
at
Thank you, Mr. Nair.
which looks at cybersecurity threats and challenges vis-a-vis China. You have a very good panel with you. I'm sure you'll introduce them. You've been introduced yesterday, so I leave it over to you. The floor is yours. We look forward to a stimulating discussion.
Thank you, sir. So, thank you, for the opportunity. I would like to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to curate and moderate this session, which is effectively on China, cybersecurity threats and challenges. I just want to take a few minutes to kind of share my own point of view on this, So, if you look at 2 decades back when a war was being fought, we had a very clear view of the enemy and his motives. The battle was being fought on land, sea, or in the air, and you could see and identify the enemy. But the battlefield today has changed. There is a new battlefront, which is the cyberspace. Let's, some of the recent events that will probably illustrate this. The pharma company Dr. Reddy's, which is developing a COVID-19 vaccine, was hit by a cyber attack. Just it also given permission to begin its final stage trials of the Russian COVID-19 vaccine. Obviously, local media reported that some of the production at Dr. Reddy's has been disrupted. This may even potentially impact the vaccine coming out. Now the question that actually one really needs to look at is that who is behind this attack, or is it a state actor, non-state actor, and why is it doing this? Is it indeed an enemy of India? What business does it have attacking a private pharma company? So today we are suddenly seeing that even private organizations are being drawn into this fight. Another interesting incident that caught my eye was there was a major attack on the Saudi oil refinery. The attack was carried out with a clear objective to actually blow up the refinery. So someone sitting remotely in some another part of the world hacks into the systems, and is actually capable of blowing up an entire refinery. Obviously, if this would have gone through, it would have had a major impact on oil. It would have had a severe economic repercussion as well. Now, fortunately, the attack didn't go as planned, and instead of blowing up the refinery, it just got shut down. But that again was a wake-up call, for everyone. That again, right now, who would have thought probably 15, 20 years back that someone would actually consider blowing up a refinery. So prima facie, if you look at these cyber attacks, they may be attributed potentially to non-state actors, but the reality may not be so. Let's look at China. Now it's been practicing what is probably now being called as neo-colonialism, for over 2 decades. And they have today quite a few have control of quite a few ports around the world, including the one in Sri Lanka. Now, China was furthering its own export business by controlling these ports. Obviously, it is a massive export business. And one of their key export, obviously, was electronics and computer hardware. But China was also smart enough to realize the true power and potential of cyber, and it embarked on a strategy of data colonialism. Let's look at this in the Indian context and how Chinese companies have mined data in India and continue to do so. So obviously, we have all heard about the ban on Chinese apps and all of that. But at its peak, the app that basically was again a Chinese app had over 40 million Indian users. 39% of even TikTok global users are from India, and mostly between the age of 16 to 24. So obviously, the data is being mined from a very, very young age, and you are looking at user behaviors as well, and potentially how this can be leveraged in the future remains to be seen. Last year, TikTok users significantly increased in India, and they had about 32 million app downloads. Again, now if you look at, these are just 2 apps, but there are close to 58 Chinese apps that have been banned, but now with all that data has been collected so far, one doesn't know what is really going to happen of that. And the fact that across these 58 companies, what all data has been accumulated, because all this data, rest in China, on the data servers that today are in China. And potentially, obviously, as per the Chinese laws, any data today sitting on any data server within China, the government has access to it. So another obviously aspect here is if you look at the hardware side, the Chinese mobile handsets today, look at all the manufacturers, right? Vivo, Oppo, Realme, OnePlus, Xiaomi, and Honor put together have close to 60% of the market share. And I think I think we are probably thinking that, oh, now that we banned social media apps, we are safe. Hardly the case, because when you today actually buy a Chinese handset, you are already giving the data, because the data is already being routed, back to China. And some of these app permissions are actually pre-installed, so you don't need to even consent to give this data. It's already assumed and given, So if you look at it, if you look at the Chinese handsets today in India, there are probably over 3 million Chinese handsets active in India. And, if one was really taking a critical view, these are effectively surveillance bots, And then another fact is that, Professor Goyal also mentioned this, that China also is the world's largest manufacturer of CCTV surveillance cameras. Hikvision alone has about 20% market share, and there are a couple of other companies as well. Put together, that number is probably as high as 35-40%, And some of these, and it was a wake-up call even for the US defense industry, A lot of the US defense installations have Hikvision cameras. Now there's a very deadly nexus of Chinese apps, mobile handsets, CCTVs, cameras, IoT devices. Now imagine all of this is being mined, analyzed using AI, big data, and machine learning. And this is not a hypothetical scenario. This is already happening. Companies like Zenhua are already doing this. As we've all read about it, that over 10,000 Indian VIPs are today being tracked. And there are organizations and companies which are state funded who are actually doing this in a very, very structured and systematic manner. And they've become giants, One of the top valued AI startups in the world is Chinese SenseTime. And its Project Viper collects data and analyzes them from all cameras, be it surveillance cameras, live camera feeds, embedded in ATMs, traffic cameras, office face scanners. And it's basically processing all this data. Again, sitting in China, all this data is available to the Chinese government, So, we are in an age now where I feel data is the new currency, and China is rich. It has systematically mined data of millions of people across the world. This is the onslaught of Chinese data colonialism. And this is the threat that we have to deal with today, It's, to kind of summarize, I would say colonizing a country no longer needs for physical invasion. You don't need military strength. You can simply do it by controlling economic and cyber activities, through networks and database and the internet. And with a single click, you can potentially, play havoc. So eventually, as we see, data has now become the new ammunition, and that is the real threat today that we are dealing with. I would now, like to introduce, the panelists today, and I'm sure they all will have their very interesting point of views on the subject today. So I would first like to welcome Professor Kamakoti. He's a professor of computer science and engineering at IIT Madras, and is also the Associate Dean of Industrial Consultancy and Sponsored Research, and is a member of the National Security Advisory Board. He's won numerous awards, and this year was awarded the Abdul Kalam Technology Innovation National Fellowship. Then we have Mr. Pavitran Rajan. We heard him yesterday as well, great presentation. He's an alumnus of the National Defense Academy. While serving in the Army, he did pioneering work in cyber intelligence and information warfare. After taking voluntary retirement in 2013, he served as an advisor for the Ministry of Home Affairs. Mr. Rajan is an adjunct facility at the Cyber Security Research Center, Punjab Engineering College, Chandigarh, where he teaches information warfare and is an advisor to the Cyber Peace Foundation. He is considered a thought leader in information warfare in India and regularly writes and advises various central and state agencies, including the armed forces. He also serves on the board of two, writing extensively on China, cybersecurity threat, cyber terrorism, and information warfare. Recently, she wrote a very insightful cover story in The Week called Internet of Strings that takes an in-depth view of India's cybersecurity challenges and preparedness, besides several other reports on securing critical infrastructure from invisible threats. She's also the recipient of the International Press Institute Award for Excellence in Journalism and the 2019 and the Ramnath Goenka Award 2019 for her ground reports on Naga underground camps. And finally, we have Commander L.R. Prakash. He's the alumnus of the National Defense Academy, Naval College of Engineering and IIT Kharagpur. He served in the Navy for 23 years. He joined CDAC in 2014 and today heads CDAC China and is closely associated with projects in e-governance and cybersecurity, and obviously has a ringside view of how policy has a deep impact on defense and civilian space. So we have a fantastic panel today, and they will all share their point of views, hopefully diverse point of views, given that the subject itself is so interesting. So I would first like to invite Professor Kamakoti to please share his views. Professor Kamakoti, over to you.
Thank you. I'm just sharing my presentation.
Yeah.
Is my presentation visible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, it is.
Yeah, thank you very much. So what I'm planning to do in the 15 minutes allotted to me is to very quickly go through China's basic fabric and what are their basic ideas, what are their governing principles based on which they are developing the technology. I think understanding of that would be very crucial, and then I'll go into specifics for cybersecurity issues, and then also some of the recommendations that we have been proposing. Again, Professor Goyal has been a great supporter for this. Thank you, Professor Goyal, from the Sitara side. So I'll also put some of these recommendations that we have been quite vociferously being echoing this for quite a while. Now, if you look at this, China as such is, what we could call as a cosmological communism. They are basically looking at both Earth and space. And then one of the very clear statement that Xi made in 2017 is that we should be faithful successors and promoters of China's excellent traditional culture. And they had a lot of principles starting from what they call as Jimmy and Tianzhou and Tianxia, where they basically say that how do we achieve the sort of supremacy in the world, and that for getting those principles up, they have certain very interesting methodologies and organizational structure, starting from the Communist Party of China and the United Front work departments, right? So this is they actually have a set of techniques and also a certain set of methodologies by which they implement those techniques. And this governing principle is what is making is actually the underlying fabric, to my understanding, of China's development, with the goal of 2030 and 2050 that they have, and and many of their documents, the roadmap documents, are essentially based on these principles. We could see a common line. I think understanding this is extremely crucial for us to see how China is going to progress. Now, if you look at their education, till 1919, there had been good mathematics placed, but 1919 to 1949, they put a lot of stress on archaeology, geology, and paleontology. And between 1950 to 1960, I think somebody has to mute your mic. I'm listening. I'm getting an echo, please. Thank you. There were notable advances, specifically in study of proteins, and then 50 to 60 itself, they started this back to China. They got all researchers who trained abroad. They brought them back to China for various reasons to support the development of the newly founded People's Republic. 58 to 62, there was what they call as the Chinese last 10-year period. They actually started moving from an agrarian economy to bringing industry to countryside, and that actually proved to be disastrous. From 1967 onwards, they had this 3-in-1, the revolutionary committees, and the members of the PLA and party cadres assumed governmental authority in manufacturing, scientific institutions, and elsewhere, and they had been focusing on this. So if you look at the way that they structured their education and training, They did this great transformation. They learned some bad lessons, but their focus has been sort of very, very pointed, and they did prepare very well for the 21st century starting from the mid of the 20th century. This is a very clear planning that they had done in the past. And there are 4 modernizations. If you look at from 1978 to 1996, how they are prepared for the 21st century. They had this sort of, a patent law enacted as early as 1982 to 84, that session. And then they had these 4 important modernizations in agriculture, industry, defense and science and technology. And then rapid privatization and economic liberalization, opening it to FDI between 1980 to 1990. The Commission of Science, Technology and Industry for National Defense. This was a crucial step towards dual-use technology. That's one thing that we need. So they never say, I'm going to use it for civil alone. They say, I will use it for anything I want. And that was a very bold decision. And they basically had this across. And they did see to it that all the dependencies that they have in enacting these dual-use technologies to place, they really attained this self-sufficiency to a large extent within that period. And the decision on the reform of the science and technology management system and also accelerate science and technology process were actually defining movements, and that they did at least 2 to 3 decades before, and that has made them sort of very, very in a very important position in the 21st century. And this is something that we need to learn very, very, very much from them. They had this 60 long-term, medium-term programs, 62 goals spread across 11 areas. Mention one area that they are not left out. And then 22 goals under 8 major special projects and 24 goals under 4 major research projects. And the consequences, the strategic research requiring a forward-looking view of the world, China and science and technology in 2050 was envisaged at 2007 by the Chinese leadership, at least 15 years before now. And a China Grand Vision came up at 2050. And today they have a very, very clear hand about Industry 4. They take cues from Germany. They listen to Germany. That's another important thing that we need to see. There is almost a sort of one-to-one relationship between German development and China development. And it has actually released this 2025 Made in China plan, and they are working towards it. 2030 AA goal, 2035 China standards, all finally culminating into 2050 vision. And this very clear-cut program, and not deviating from it, and not saying, oh, can we do, can we not do, accepting failures, investing in the industry. These are some things that we need to learn from China, and that is some very good lessons also. Now, this is the report of the Chinese Academy of Sciences 11 years before, and this is all the 8 different plans they had, in which your cyber security plays an extremely important place. As you see, the system of ubiquitous information networking, and then all that is going to come from this 5G is actually where we are going to enable a lot more of data generation and monitoring. All those things have been very, very beautifully trained here, starting from national and public security systems. And they also had this disruptive technologies. They have 22 disruptive technologies, in which at least 6 of them are in international competitiveness, which includes ICT in a very big way, 4 on basic sciences, 7 on strategic importance, specifically from China's sustainability, 2 on national and public security, and 3 on cutting edge technology. And some of the things I have listed here, there are 22 disruptive technologies, specifically from the science and technology initiatives. And they are progressing very, very seriously on this. And so this is also something that we need to keep in mind. So finally, from the 2025 point of view, this is the 10 core industries that they are looking at. And all this are trained across cyber, because they are looking at a very highly connected network by which they will enable these things. And again, all very clear-cut agenda. So 2025, they want to become a major manufacturing power. 2035, global manufacturing power. and 2049 is the leading manufacturing superpower. So this is something that they have set up, and though we thought it is ambitious, I think 2025 they will achieve quite a significant amount of strategic things. Okay, and they actually have gone from a very wonderful building stack. They have a set of support systems followed by key equipments and then manufacturing. So they go from a bottom-up approach. They build these support systems in smart network infrastructure, internet security. These two are the most important thing. Then they go up to the next key equipments where they have smart sensors and network chips and open source platforms. And then on top of it, they build all these smart products. And this has begun a very nice supplier manufacturer vendor relationship and a very nice flow for them. So this is how they have prepared themselves, and this is a very, very, very interesting lesson that the world has to learn from them. I don't have any doubts that they have done a very rigorous exercise to bring this up, and the government has been very focused on taking this up. Now, this is the entire hub that they plan to set up, and manufacturing is going to be the central key of this. And you have artificial intelligence, and you have the Belt and Road Initiative type of things, the digitalization, which is the Internet Plus. And then the most important thing is they are also pushing their standards, China standards, by 2035. And they are focusing on that. They have a united approach in getting this done. There is a complete support to do this. Okay, so these are some things that we need to keep in mind before we say, yes, we want to go and address the issues. Right? So that's why I thought I need to spend these 5 minutes to basically go. And this is the 2050 Chinese Innovation Toolbox that we get. And you have all these things, civil military integration efforts, 5-year plans, sector-specific industrial plans, R&D funding, creators of centers of sector-specific innovation, creation of national champions in STEM. Right? This is science, technology, engineering, management, where they actually fund, and they fund in industry, in the Indian industry, rather than saying that fund their own indigenous industry, rather than saying, oh, we guys can't do this, we are useless, right? That is the sort of sometimes very irritating, can we do or not? So this is sometimes very irritating things that we listen about our own industry by our own people, but this is how they go fund this industry and make them great. Right? So that is how they have attacked the world, and these are very important lessons. And one other thing, suppose they have a bottleneck in something, they actually go and get a foreign investment specifically on the topic where there is a weakness and fill that gap. And that is selective foreign investment or joint ventures with Western firms. They have never stopped, and they have done that. So this is some overall stuff. With this as a background, in the next 7 minutes I have, what I'm going to do is to very quickly talk about what is happening today. There is a changing landscape of attacks, right? So we are moving from sort of an individual attack to an organizational attack, as many of the speakers mentioned. So we go and attack a bank. We go and attack a bank as a whole entity, not an individual customer. There are attacks on stock exchanges. There are attacks on on power grids, as Raja mentioned in his chat, right? So there are multiple things on organizations. There are nuclear installations and so many things. And so I'll also bring out very crucially why we need this indigenization, and the way to install this indigenization, bring the indigenization, is to actually follow the China approach. And that is where we need to take a lot more lessons on focused leadership and focused focused S&T programs, which will basically bring us to that shape, right? So now everything centers about one part, which is 5G. 5G is not 4G plus. It is not that you see TV with high definition thing. It is entertainment plus so much about that. And we are looking at 4G as 5G as an economic transformer, and it becomes the crucial part of your industry 4, where we have human to machine and machine to machine communication, and we are looking at extreme mobile broadband. In addition, we are looking at massive scale communication, and also ultra reliable low latency services. And this is going to become the part of this. As we carefully looked at, China established 5G supremacy before they actually introduced the cryptocurrency, because a cryptocurrency today needs a lot more of processing at the end user level, and that needs a 5G level connection to quickly affect cryptocurrency. So this is how they have planned. The dependency of cryptocurrency on 5G is extremely crucial, and China has taken that step. So this is something that the 5G is going to be a very crucial part of our basic building block, or actually a determining factor in when we really want to get this leadership. And why we should get this leadership, let us look at this. Today, when we look at 5G ecosystem, we are going to have, say, 10x more towers than 4G, and so there are going to be a lot more edge devices, and the COVID also has taught how the ICT technology is going to become an integral part of the way of living. And if you are going to expose that to cyber security issues, we are going to be in a bigger soup. So it is just not strategic importance that I need security. It is also for civilian importance that I need security, and that is what this particular slide we are looking. We want to establish here. So now let us go about what is happening here. Some of these attacks which are basically attributed to China and North Korea, right? So this is one NSA tool attack. NSA tool attack in the sense that this was actually promoted by NSA. I'll just quickly come into the history of that. Wherein one day morning, Baltimore opened all the systems and everything was actually locked. And then, within a few minutes, we actually started getting, several. This was just a Google search, say within 5 to 6 hours, by which we got these type of news. So if you look at this NSA tool attack on this US cities, Baltimore was the epicenter of the attack, and the tool. This was a tool developed by NSA of USA, which landed in its own backyard. And the city admin network was attacked, and the government systems completely shut down. And it was actually on a analysis. It was actually Eternal Blue, which actually exploited a vulnerability in certain versions of Microsoft's Windows XP and Vista systems, allowing an external party to execute remote commands on the target. So it was the operating system exploit, and they locked the system, and they started asking ransom for removing the system. So when we look at this is a way by which you can stun a country, right? Stun one particular city or state or whatever you call that Baltimore is. I don't know what is Baltimore, but it is one reasonably large place. So now if you look at the history of these exploits, see, Nemesis is god of retribution, perishing all immoderate fortunes. This is what Russell has written a definition for Nemesis. This was actually promoted by NSA USA, the National Security Agency of the United States of America, to actually do surveillance on the entire world. So they funded some companies. I don't want to name those companies, and you guys will know that they are particularly put all these exploits inside that, right? And then one disgruntled employee actually, exposed all these things to a group called shadow brokers. The shadow brokers actually openly leaked these exploits at some point of time. And once this was leaked out, Microsoft, Cisco, Palo Alto were some of the major affected parties because they had these exploits there. And these were only vulnerabilities. They were saying that these are the vulnerabilities, and now we have to build the exploits on top of it. So of all these vulnerabilities, the Eternal Blue was the one that was easily understood. And so they did a POC, a proof of concept, and an exploit code was released by an unknown hacker group. This proof of concept was used by a North Korean hacker group to develop WannaCry and release it. This Kaspersky investigation, after at least a year, actually showed that this is how this has happened. And the Russian hacker group actually released NotPetya, which actually is a much more rigorous version than the ransomware, because it goes and attacks the boot record, and actually FedEx lost close to 400 million. So this is all the news that we get to a large extent authentic news. Now, if you look at the role of China in this, the Chinese agents acquired access to NSA tools and reworked on those. Right? And Symantec, which is another antivirus agency, believes that China did not steal the code, but when NSA actually attacked their own computers, they just put a honeypot and found out how they are attacking and learned from them. Right? The NSA actually used sophisticated malware to destroy Iran's nuclear centrifuges, and then saw the same code proliferate around the world, doing damage to random targets, including American business giants like Chevron. So this is how the entire flow of events, specifically with respect to this happened. So here, if you actually, this is a NotPetya stuff. If you press the next key, it will show how much Bitcoin you want to give. And this was, well, Eternal Blue is one such vulnerability, the least complex, and there are many more in the pipeline for attackers. And who gave this? This is the contribution of NSA of USA, which now is banning Huawei. Okay, so let us understand the whole world in its perspective, not just China. This is my whole stuff here. Now, so we have to concentrate first. 5G is the highest in our agenda. Next comes all the other indigenization. So the 5G policy.
I would request you wrap up in the next 3 to 4 minutes, please.
Yes, I will wrap up. So we have. So I had 4 minutes. Yes, I'll do that. Okay. So there are 5 main policies. There are international standards. There are technology. There is security, cost, and governance. Now the main thing is the supply chain. Today we need security to. If we want full security, we need 100% indigenization. The reason is that the supply chain, this is the most economical supply chain for making an electronics product, and we go from Japan to USA to China to USA, Malaysia, Singapore, China. Finally, it comes to USA. So suppose somebody says made in USA, it doesn't mean it has not gone through some of our quote-unquote friendly countries. And there is an India-specific 5G rollout model, which our own Indian fellows are saying, oh, we should not do island and all these things. This is a very, very important India-specific 5G rollout model that we want to come out. There is a 5G standard called LMLC, large mobility, low mobility, large coverage, that we are proposing. We got it through with lot of difficulty. Again, opposed by our own MNC Indian people working in MNCs, opposing it. We got it through ITU, and now we want the Indian telcos and other people to follow it. And there's a lot of opposition just even to introduce one 5G standard of India. And this is the sort of unity we have in our country, and that is where China is winning. And then each of these equipments need microprocessors, and then microprocessors has to be taken up. Government has come out with the Swadeshi microprocessor. IIT Madras is also involved in one such Swadeshi microprocessor, but that program has to go up in a very big way, because that's a programmable entity inside this entire 5G game. And this programmable entity is one that would be attacked for getting certain malware into the network. So we have to encourage indigenous microprocessors. And then and the other thing is that the IPs from India has actually getting acquired by the MNCs. We need to stop that. And so if the IP market of Indian IPs has to grow, there is a need to silicon proof them. So the government, so what we are encouraging the government and the industry put together, the large major industries to come forward and set up an India chip fund, which will basically enable Indian IPs to be manufactured outside. And we need to have very critical PCB testing facilities in the country, because this is where you have seen Supermicro's issue there. And that we have to put an united effort to get the Pi/2 BPSK scheme, which is a specific standard for India 5G, which will give us some sort of a control over the entire 5G thing, a significant control in this. And then, of course, we need a lot of capacity and skill set development. And there is also that we saw total internet services shut down in specific geographical area. And so when because of various political and other reasons, So the next generation war is going to be based on these cyber systems, and so we need to also get certain what we call as a cyber readiness. I actually classify as three cyber readiness, and we need to have very clear-cut policies of how to have this cyber readiness, wherein we can selectively disable and enable certain services depending upon the situations at these places. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Kamakoti. That was an amazing presentation. You've right from the history of how China has evolved to what China is planning in the next 3 decades is truly astounding, and I think we have a lot of catching up to do. Next, I'm going to invite Mr. Rajan to come and share his thoughts. Mr. Rajan, please.
Yeah, good morning, Munjal. A very great presentation as usual by Professor Kamakoti. It will be a tough act to match him. He's after all, very. So that's what happens. But then I know Professor Kamakoti's thinking, and I totally respect that particular fact. Also, my other panelists, Commander L.R. Prakash, these are all people who I've been involved with for quite a long time. So let me jump into my presentation by 1 second. Let me. So is my screen visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. May I request for other people to switch, mute their mics so that it doesn't echo? Okay, great. So I chose this theme, civil-military fusion is what I chose. But by the time I did my research yesterday, I found out the Americans had changed the name to military-civil fusion for, because civil-military is only for the Americans. Now, this is one gentleman I truly respect, Henry Kissinger, because he's a realist. And realism is very important when you deal with national matters. And he clearly says it's not a matter of what is true that counts, but a matter of what is perceived to be true. And this is something I feel is quite deep. And it might also, I go with Professor Kamakoti when he says that China might not be the actual, it's just one part of the phenomenon. You need to look at the overall global order to understand where we are today. And this is what, when I start off, the realities of today, I re-emphasize, because yesterday's tabletop, an excellent presentation, but I realized at the end of the tabletop, what are the boards and what are the CEOs where they're going to spend their money? They're going to spend their money on Chinese products and American products. Those are the realities which we face today. So this is a particular slide which I've taken from the Snowden. A man, again, I greatly respect, because maybe 2,000 years hence, he might be called as the New Age prophet. A guy who sacrifices a life at a very young age to bring out the truth to the people. So there you have. This is a photograph of a Cisco router being opened up by the American NSA, and they're changing the firmware. They're implanting hardware into it so that it can bypass the air gap. And we in India, in the last so many years, have spent almost 30,000 crores creating a military network system to fight our next wars based on Cisco. Another slide also, which I thought I'll pull out, because this is very important, because these are all things which are publicly known, and we are all the security guys. So this is another slide which shows from which year to what, the iconic US companies are all aligned with the US deep state. So when you say that only China is a threat, they are the people who are weaponizing MNCs, etc. That is not true. They are just copying what the US is doing, and it's very evident. And if we don't accept these facts, our solutions will be totally wrong. Somehow it is very taboo in India to talk about reality. So, okay, what is military civil fusion? So this is, I've just copied it. China truly, it is a strategy where China as a nation can advance. And that is something which all nations will have no quarrel with. So what are they, the MCF concentrated on? That's a military civil fusion. It's all about artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence is all about data flows. And why are they concentrating on that is basically the international order rests on military dominance. If you do not accept these facts, then you will totally go wrong. So what are the key technologies? Professor Kamakoti has already covered it, so I will not dwell much into it. I'll just flash it over there. So why did China choose the path which they have chosen? Asymmetric information competition. We are where we are in a system which has evolved over the last 200 odd years. India and China were both almost in the same boat just about 30 years back. So innovation to catch up with the rest, etc., is not an easy job at all. You have to spend huge amounts of money. You cannot, do we have that sort of money as a nation? We have created a huge military industrial complex in India. Why I say a huge military industrial complex is, I found the budget of the, I wrote a monograph recently for another think tank called Policy Perspective Foundation. And that gave me, focus to research into certain aspects. I found to my, surprise, DARPA's annual budget is about $3.5 billion, $3.5 billion, okay? And they hardly have any permanent staff and a very shoestring sort of. And I found the DRDO has a $3 billion budget. Okay, and if you apply normal economic principles of, how much does a dollar go in India? It is a much bigger budget if you compare it from that particular point of view. But we have grossly underdelivered because we have not understood, we have not paid attention to human nature, and that's the reason why communism failed. Professor Kamakoti and Commander Prakash are exceptional people, motivated, but exception cannot be the rule. Average gentlemen like me are, don't look at the greater good of. I am a slightly more selfish person. That is how human beings are, and we think about ourselves first rather than the greater good of the nation. If you do not accept all these and recognize these, you will get the whole solution wrong. So why did China go for the military civil fusion? They realized that no one is going to give them military technology, like the way we keep putting money and we sign offset clauses. Nothing is, they're not going to give it to you. It's very clear. So they said, let's concentrate on civil technologies. For civil technologies, everyone is ready to collaborate. If you put in money, they will, you can buy off companies, you can collaborate with them, what you don't want, and slowly you transfer the knowledge back into China. A very smart, pragmatic approach. Now, I put this slide because I knew Professor Kamakoti is going to be there. They have this strategy in the military civil fusion, the 7 sons of national defense and their specializations, and the 7 sons of the arms industry. The whole thing is around universities in China. Universities handhold private enterprise. In India, we do not. We do not because the GFR does not permit it. I was told by another very eminent, academician of India, Dr. Akshay Agarwal, the former Vice Chancellor of GTU. He told me, Pavi, the average IIT professor sits on almost 100 crores of projects, but nothing comes out of that ecosystem into India. He doesn't have time. Where are our industries? If you do not handhold our private enterprises, because let me be very clear, in ICT, there are tomes written by a lot of people saying the public sector will not work. The public sector will not work because of the entry barriers of ICT being very low. Today in India, this whole ICT industry is hamstrung, other than the ITES industry, that is a outsourcing industry, which is not at all dependent on India. It is hamstrung by 2 sets of people. One is the ITES industry because they are their master's voice because they're getting money from foreign countries. And the second is our academic and bureaucratic structure. because they find the private industry in ICT, if they take off, then their relevance is no longer going to be there. This I say it, not because I've studied it in the last 6-7 years. I've been in government. Now I'm out of government and I'm seeing both sides, and I'm interacting with a lot of people, and we have created rules in such a way that people cannot, even if people want to, they cannot. You need to change the rules. Okay, this is, I just pulled it out. It's a top secret security credential for, academia given over there. We need to create rules where academicians and private enterprises are given top secret, security credentials. Just because, you are a government employee doesn't mean it's all citizens are, part of the Indian ecosystem, and they need to be trusted. And there must be a method of, it should not be a blind trust. Even for a government employee, there is a background security verification check done. Then once you are made to sign on, you've got certain restrictions on your conduct. Then there is an intelligence watch on you. So those are the things which we need to do for our private industry and for academicians, so that they get those clearances, wherein our government establishment holds everything close to themselves. That such an approach is what hamstrings India. So this is the R&D spend of China. If you look at basic, applied, and experimental, so that is where they put most of their money, the experimental part, on innovation, not on primary research. And that is all about ICT, which Professor Kamakoti is correctly brought out. And this is where we are. Okay, this one slide is a beautiful slide which shows where the data flows are going to go. We can keep talking about AI till the cows come home, and you will realize from this particular slide, it is the social networks, and it is the operating systems of the world, and the cloud services. These are the three particular places where which will get you the data. We are not there. Our rules, our people don't allow us to even participate in get in there. One ban by the Indian government on PUBG, that is a Chinese social network gaming this, where only 5% of the revenue comes from India, but a much larger percentage of people were participating. The Indians were the majority participants, and it wiped out about $30 billion from market capitalization of the parent company. It's all there right in front of you. We don't recognize it. But who is the Indian system hand-holding? They are hand-holding Amazon, Microsoft, Google, what have you. Today, our money is being spent in hand-holding this. We have got something called the PLI scheme, which maybe Professor Goyal can again expand on. Today, we are going to spend an amazing amount of money to shift, assembling of smartphones over here. A fraction of that money will supercharge our Indian industry. Okay, and with that money, what are we planning to achieve? We are planning to achieve some low-cost jobs. Okay, and who is going to finally benefit out of that money? It is again going to be the US and China. So we have today, what is a multi-domain warfare? Since the nuclear weapons have come, big powers cannot openly fight wars. That industrial era wars are over. So today's wars are mostly in this particular field called multi-domain warfare. As we speak, that wars happen. Look at those places, economy, diplomacy, politics, energy and resources, okay, cyberspace, influence, legal, public opinion. That is where we are. And then I come into 5G. Okay, this is a slide, from a Chinese, this on military civil fusion. And you look at it, smart cities. We've declared a policy for smart cities. We said, okay, we'll have 100 smart cities. Who are going to build those smart cities? We have set a digital India, 100% digital economy. Who are going to be the beneficiaries of these policies? This slide captures the whole thing. China is going to be a major beneficiary. The rest is going to the US and the rest of the West. So I've shown you the slide yesterday before. So this is where we are. On the LAC, okay, they come in a couple of kilometers and there is, we have suddenly become alert, but they have deeply penetrated into the Indian ecosystem. And it has happened over the last 2 decades. Yes, every intelligence agency claims they want the government. But so then what? Our entire broadband network is controlled out of Huawei. Okay, in Delhi. They've got the center. And we have a standoff with at the LAC. And even when the standoff was happening, the DOT was backing for upgrades. The BSNL was backing for upgrades from Huawei and ZTE. Okay, digital Silk Roads. Okay, that is the Chinese plan, which I have no quarrel with that plan. If given a choice for India, we would also like to do what they are trying to do. So we cannot quarrel with a Chinese plan, which they are planning to advance. But we need to be careful about what are our plans. What is our dream? What is the Indian dream? The Indian dream cannot be that we will educate our best and brightest in IITs, spending taxpayers' money, and then they'll go to the West and spend and send some part of the money back as a money order. That cannot be the Indian dream. So there you have. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting, and that is what is happening to us as we speak. Now, what is the solution? So this is a cliche. Information is the oil of the 21st century, and analytics is the combustion engine. So, that analytics part of it is very important because we have got the largest trained manpower who can do analytics. Okay. They're all working out of cities from here in Bangalore, Chennai, Delhi, NCR, what have you, for American companies. Just yesterday, there is this Fresh to Home. Okay. Fresh to Home is a company which I have been, quite closely associated because the founder, Shan, and their CTO, etc., was working in Zynga, wherein I got them out of, Zynga to start off to create something for the Indian ICT industry. They also parallelly did something for themselves because the Indian ecosystem had not woken up. So they registered the company not in India. They went and registered it in Singapore. For the simple reason, our policy said any angel funding which is coming in, 30% will be taken as tax. So Shan called me and said, Pavi, I hope, because this can't be viable if I have to pay 30% of the angel money back into, taxes. So I'm registering it in Singapore. Today, they have attracted about $121 million, and they are on the way to become a unicorn. Okay. And this whole company is based on AI, machine learning, and big data. In fact, big data, what people don't realize, the first platform to handle big data, Membase, was created by this team when they were working for Singa right out of Bangalore. But our Indian establishment has gifted all our strategic data to the big tech of the US with no tender. Okay, with no tender. Let me tell you, this is one of the biggest national security scandals. I don't know how historians will look at this. So there you are. What is the fight all about? This is about the percentile of the population and the wealth. Okay. To the left, you will find is where the bulk of the Indian population is. And by the time we come into the higher percentages of earning, we become a very minute, part of it. People sitting in this particular seminar are somewhere there. Okay. They're somewhere in the higher percentage. The vast majority of Indians are in the lower percentages. But look at China. They pulled themselves up. We can't have a quarrel with this. They are a nation.
Mr. Rajan would request you to wind up in the next couple of minutes, please.
Yeah, I will. So, and you look at the rest of the world. So that is what is the fight all about. And what is our biggest challenge? The biggest challenge, like I yesterday also said, is unemployment and the youth bulge. So what is our short-term plans? Because we can't have a 10-year-old plan where we create a chip from scratch and we will now race in 10 years. We don't have that time. We don't have that luxury. So this is something from Clausewitz. Clausewitz is a very famous guy, which all military strategicians like to quote. But he correctly says, the most decisive act of judgment, which the statement and the general exercise, is rightly to understand the war in which he engages. If you don't understand the war in what you are engaging with, you are definitely bound to lose. Thank you. I finished. Those are my contact details. Anyone is free to write it to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rajan. It's really interesting to see your point of view on this, on the civil military strategy and what India needs to do. Clearly, we need to do more in terms of providing funding for our own research institutions and our own private enterprises. The way China has gone about it, obviously, they've poured money and today really built giant companies which are really ruling the IT space and as well as the tech space. I would now invite Ms. Namrata to come forward and share her views. Ms. Namrata, please.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Am I audible?
Yes, Namrata, please go ahead.
So while we are, discussing and laying out cyber threats from China, we must not lose sight of the fact that cyber warfare of any kind is ultimately, what is it aimed at? That's the question we all need to look at. It's aimed at hijacking and controlling narratives. China wants to emerge as a global leader, the most powerful nation, which means the final aim in developing, controlling high-end technologies, whether we're talking of 5G, whether we talk of, AI, it's ultimately linked to a more basic and real-time need to control information flow, and that's information warfare. So it's no surprise that when China had academic discussions of cyber warfare first, when it started in China, they started by calling it not cyber warfare but information warfare. They had the example of how the US military at that time had benefited from high-end technologies during the Gulf War. China soon began to realize that there is no way to adequately defend itself without following the changes in the form of war in which high-end technologies, mainly information technologies, will play critical roles. In 2003, the Central Committee of the CCP and China's Central Military Commission, they approved the concept of 3 warfares that comprise psychological, media, and legal warfares. So let's talk about, media warfares. And in terms of how, like Munjal was raising this point of how apps have been banned, and you raised this point of why, to what end were really, the applications doing. So whether they, if China had backdoor entries or if they were trying to, use those apps, what was it really for? I was in touch recently with Citizen Lab. They are the people who exposed the WhatsApp controversy last year, and they were talking of, how NSO, the Israeli spy agency, had been really hacking WhatsApp. Those examples were proved before the world. There were lot of examples in India itself, whether they were human rights activists, lawyers, journalists. They also came out with another report. So they said, and this was just on WeChat, the reason the investigation by Citizen Lab, it's Toronto-based, they came out with really startling revelations which showed that applications like TikTok, WeChat, or all these applications that you were referring to, what are they doing? They're cleaning your data. They are, using all of that information that they get of what kind of stuff, we are looking at, what is it that each user in India is really searching for, and then they, use those kind of narratives to push in the Chinese narrative. For example, TikTok nearly has, more than 100 million active users in the country. If through the backdoor, the CCP can read popular sentiments on issues by collecting, analyzing data from crores of phones of TikTok users, they can spread disinformation in India, which would be, bigger than any other kind of threat that they can have in when we talk of Chinese threats and, applications. So China's military prowess, its warfare for that matter, truly depends on how they control the flow of information. And even though, TikTok had been, refuting all the allegations, the fact is that a lot of studies that have been done world over have shown that, the kind of inroads China has made, whether it's spreading disinformation or fake news, what we saw during the COVID crisis was very important. Coming from the media, the first time what I saw, in more than decades of journalism, they were trying to control the way the COVID narrative was being run. Chinese spying networks, they were more than active, scouting for targets, looking for the kind of way they can control information. A lot of fake news. It's been, the year which has seen the maximum fake news, warfare, the kind of information flow coming from China. How are we equipped? Was the media really equipped to handle it? From the government side, I personally feel it is a very lackadaisical approach. The Home Ministry was continuously trying to counter it through PIB. So the Press Information Bureau was getting these regular fact check updates where the ministry itself found, and I'm talking of the Home Ministry, we have all these cyber structures in place. What they were trying to do was issue a press release trying to tell us, okay, this is fact, they would just say that, okay, this is fake news, but how many of us really went out there to say that this was fake news? The news was already out, it was consumed by millions. It was driving the narrative even before the government could respond. So then they created a separate unit called a PIB fact check unit. So the government is doing a lot of, they have information dissemination systems, but we're really lagging behind in countering misinformation, particularly from, neighboring countries, China, Pakistan. The other way the media is really used, and I'm, giving the example of how even Indian journalists are targeted. Recently, there was this arrest of an Indian journalist by the Delhi police in an espionage case, and that's an example of how desperately China is trying to control information flow. So, how these, unlike technological threats discussed, there are media houses. Their systems can be hacked and data can be either stolen or planted. But the potential of psychological warfare, I feel, is huge when it comes to the role the media can really play. And there, it's not just the media of news dissemination, but think tank groups, strategic planning, media management cells in different countries. How you can be used to really control the flow of information in news, and you could be just the second or the third layer in this whole field. They are obviously scouting for journalists who can be influence drivers across, and we've seen a couple of cases, not just in India, but in our neighborhood. So similar to hacking efforts and compromising hardware or software, mind management here is the key. So that's what China is doing. So whether it is organizing trips to Beijing, inviting journalists for discussions, panel discussions like these, the risks really don't go away when it comes to China. So unlike democracies which have a certain kind of, I won't say cavalier attitude, but we don't really pay too much attention in airing contrary opinions. The Communist Party really believes in controlling even contrary views. So which way dissent has to be shaped, not block out dissent, but how to shape dissent is also something we need to look at when we talk of cyber warfare. So we really cannot block out China. What we need to do is we need to counter the kind of, even the dissent they're shaping. We might overtly see that this is what is the aim, but that could be certainly something that even the media planners or the government, planners of information dissemination might not even realize of how even dissent is being shaped. So China's cyber warfare, another area I would touch upon is it's not just restricted to military or espionage. China is also now being increasingly accused of stealing intellectual wealth, trade secrets through warfare. Recently, the chairman of the US House Intelligence Committee, he said that there's a concerted effort by the government of China to get into businesses of stealing economic secrets to put into use in China to compete against US economy. So the director of National Security Agency, General Alexander, he described the result of this effect as the greatest transfer of wealth in history. That's something we're not really looking at when we talk of threats from China. We're not looking at how intellectual drainage from China can happen through the kind of things we are seeing in the US. That could be a learning experience which policy shapers can really look at. And as Professor Kamakoti, I think, was mentioning that the 10 parameters or the 10 key industries really China is looking ahead. We must not forget that China always plans ahead. It's always looking at future. It has 50 or 100-year plans. India today, again, as we mentioned yesterday, has not shaped, we don't have a national security doctrine. So when we have elections, we talk of, whether the need of a national security doctrine. Recently, with this government coming in power, there is talk of, the need for it. And yes, there have been discussions with National Security Advisory Board up to the level when they came out with the full document. of shaping 50 or 100-year strategies. But that again went into cold storage. Neither of the governments in the last 10, 15 years have actually taken it to a level of implementation. But compared to that, China's been doing that for a long time. In 2015, the Chinese premier had launched a Made in China, as mentioned, 2025 strategic plan. So what are these 10 key industries? Biomedicine, robotics, space technology, cloud computing, artificial intelligence. After that, what's happened is the US has detected the threats and tried to counter them. They've imposed tariffs on Chinese goods, something that we think only in knee-jerk reactions. They have been accusing China of intellectual property theft. They forced technology transfer from US companies, Chinese entities. The Office of the US Trade Representative reports that China is once again stealing data following a perceived lull after the latter years of the Obama administration. Now that's once again picked up, and there's a strong correlation between the companies targeted and the China's 10 key industries. So these are obvious examples of how these things have been happening. So then if we talk of how prepared is India in dealing Chinese threats, the government has increased a lot of there is a lot of information dissemination as far as the media is concerned. There are efforts, either in all different sectors, power, telecom, financial services. They're being monitored extremely closely compared to what they were. And the government also plans to expand and monitor and focus on companies funded by Chinese investors. Although I would still feel that the degree of surveillance may vary here, and we might need to take a look at that. So, and then recently, another area where we I think need to really look at is in July. I was listening to the Prime Minister having a discussion with the Google CKO, where he was talking about wide-ranging issues such as data security, privacy concerns, use of technology to transform lives of farmers. So this virtual interaction basically talked of further leveraging technology and providing not only healthcare services, which were being driven by COVID concerns, but the PM's focus was also on benefits of AI in agriculture. That caught my attention the most. The background is that in 2018, and I want to flag this, the US Department of Homeland Security had prepared a report. It was called the Threats to Precision Agriculture, which addressed security threats related to the adoption and impact of new digital technologies in crop and lifestyle production. So agriculture, where we in that report, it said that while it employs a variety of embedded connected technologies that rely on remote sensing, it could be global positioning, communication systems to generate big data, data analytics, machine learning. These technologies allow for more precision application of agricultural livestock management, fertilizer, seeds, pesticides, resulting in low costs, improved yields. So the DHS said that a consequence of this rapidly advanced digital revolution was increased exposure to cyber and other vulnerabilities in the agriculture sector. So with an economy, where we largely sustain on agriculture, I wonder whether this is the biggest challenge for India today when we talk of safeguarding agri-technologies from China's cyber army. So should we talk of cyber security threats today when we are talking of it, I think this needs greater attention. So when we talk of also IoT devices, are we leaving agriculture out of it? When we talk of botnet attacks, we talk of systems. And mainly the mindset is that you look at digital India and we look at smart cities and we think that this is only aimed at cities, and it's not really aimed at the rural threats. Then the increasing cyber penetration by China, those cyber criminal, whether it's cyber criminal purposes, whether it's hacking into accounts, whether it's but the capacity the IoT infrastructure really has in supporting agri-tech is it will be outstanding, but so come the threats. What the IoT can really do is so there are examples the DHS has really listed out to the US government where we can draw out some examples and learn from. Major crop disease infestation, animal diseases can create immediate cascading effects resulting in economic loss of destroyed crops.
I request you to wind up in the next couple of minutes, please.
Yes. So if they where countries will ban meat, vegetable exports once the crisis is over. They build up to that level, and the threat, rises without us really realizing how agri-technology has been compromised. We will not be able to control it if it, goes out of hand. So imagine a scenario when China has compromised data integrity, where they imply that it's a crop or animal disease outbreak. The media would lap it up before even the government really, responds. There would be so much on the internet. There would be up till the time the government will want to, dump on data on the internet to show that this was fake news. This is what the disease is. This is what the real data is revealing. Outbreak of that it was fake, and then trying to, mitigate. Mitigation would really take 100% accountability for all the cattle. By the time all of that is done, the damage has already been done. So, similarly, we can talk of smart cities, we can talk of, then we can go to 5G networks where, tomorrow we already have, in real-time data, cows with collars, monitoring livestock health. So these are issues I would flag. And I think our dependency on, Chinese technology, company, hardware, devices, products will happen, and it's something we cannot avoid, but we need to have the checks and balances and government agencies and the media together countering these threats. So thank you. These are the issues I think we need to look at.
Right. Thank you so much, Namrata, and I'm glad you touch upon the agri aspect, and it's again not spoken too much about, but I always have been concerned about the fact that if where the satellite systems are hacked, and we are then putting out forecasts which are damaging to the farmers, we can have a very wide sweeping impact on the agri economy of the country, and these are very, very real threats now, and again, I think probably agriculture, we now see it as a low-tech industry, but I think tech now has a pretty massive influence on it. Moving on, I'm going to now request Commander Prakash to come and share his views, please. Commander Prakash, over to you.
Good afternoon. I'm glad I am last on the panel. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So thankfully, Professor Kamakoti, Pavitra Rajan, Ms. Namrata have already done most of my work for me. So that also means that I'll be gifting you some extra time because I expect to finish within a couple of minutes. Just a moment while I share my screen. Just a moment. Present.
Yeah, if you can now, sir, you
should be. Yep. Here we go. I hope it's visible.
Yeah, it's visible, sir.
Yeah. So very briefly, of course, as disclaimer at the start, the facts that I'm sharing are from public domain, and they are more for inferences, drawing inferences rather than legal documentation. A very brief examination of Chinese data policies for companies and for people. As far as companies are concerned, if you're a company in China, there is complete control over whatever data you collect from the collection stage, whether it's mapping, whether it's healthcare. There are explicit laws which say collection of data only Chinese or joint venture companies will do. Even then, explicit permission is required for any outbound data flow. Apps are tightly regulated, both in privacy, this thing, and for LEA intervention. And there's mandatory compliance, including cloud-based services. If you want to offer a cloud-based service, put the server in China. They are pretty much clear over it. They have also given, logical reasons for it. For example, we are a big country. We have multiple seismic zones. You can put high availability here. Latency and Chinese consumer experience will be poor if you locate it abroad, etc. But regardless of how you look at it, it's still mandatory. As far as the people go, we are aware of the Great Firewall of China. No direct equivalents of Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Google. VPNs are mostly prohibited. Strict regulation is there on social media. Big Brother is always watching. You have a VPN, a legal VPN there. Be prepared for it to be SSL, I mean, to be decrypted and re-encrypted at the firewall stage, right? Now, what do we infer from this? China wants a stranglehold on its own data. It's very clear. Whatever data China is generating, and obviously its population and its resources mean a huge lot of data generated. China is clear, I'll acquire and hold it first. If you just Google and see, as late as 2004, 2005, there were UN and US health institutes giving advice to China, saying that you don't have your electronic healthcare system in place, you know, let us in and we'll modernize you and everything. China said, no. Thanks, no. I intend developing it myself. I'll start collecting the data when I can control it. For mapping, they said any data that you collect, you hand over to us, we'll decide how to give it to you. So they said, what are you going to do with the data? No idea, but we are clear we are not giving it to you. Essentially, this was their strategy from the beginning. Obviously, because of the totalitarian regime, so they want total state control over the population's exposure to data, but they have gone about it in a slightly different way. They don't, they have, of course, a big stick, but they also try to substitute, whether it's Twitter, Google, Amazon, WhatsApp, they have their own substitutes. And now they have got what the Batex giants, Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent, Xiaomi, which equally, I mean, you could call them worthy competitors to the what we call FAMG, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, Google. They have their own giants. As several people pointed out, China has been, leadership of China is essentially distinguished by its thought process, its strategy. Mao famously had the 4 modernizations. In 2004, Hu Jintao, the current guy's predecessor, initiated the new historic missions for the military. He said, we are now basing our military on the scientific development concept, and we'll use scientific development to dominate. One corollary of this was their dedicated cyber warfare force, military units, government cyber warfare specialists, and civilian and semi-civilian groups also engaged in similar thing, each with their own roles and mandates. I'll just give a few examples. There are 2 reports, Shadows in the Cloud and Tracking the Ghostnet. Tracking the Ghostnet came in 2009. Essentially, it is the first known, what we used to call the Chinese virus, USB virus, music.exe, if people remember. And a academic group from Canada, the Infowar group, came out with this report in 2009. They said around 1,300 hosts in 103 countries, indiscriminately, wherever somebody put a USB, they tried to get in. But around 30% of it were actually high-value infected hosts, and they gave plenty of access back to their controllers in China. They were one of the first popular RATs or remote access tools. Then came 1 year later, the same group put out Shadows in the Cloud. Now, unlike the indiscriminate USB attack, and I was in the government that time, so I actually appreciated, you know, the evolution from a purely technical standpoint. They moved out from USB viruses to everything. They had Facebook clickjacking, they had fake links in Twitter, they had malicious PDFs, of course their favorite USB-borne viruses, everything. But now they were not worldwide. They had targeted areas. Indian government, including one of the highest officers of our government, the reports are there in public domain. Very highly recommended reading, though now it's a decade old. I would say very highly recommended reading, right? So then came the Mandiant report just about a year and a half later. Now, Kevin Mandiant at that time was an independent but funded by the US government researcher. And those were the times when we were just exploring the term APT, Advanced Persistent Threats. And his report was what was named APT-1, the first such group to actually distinctively be named. He traced it back to PLA Unit 61398 in China. Interestingly, Kevin Mandiant tracked this group for closer part of a decade before coming out with this report publicly. In the meantime, he was reporting to the US government, of course. Okay. And now, this was first indication that the PLA was no longer looking at pure warfare. They were looking at commercial, they were looking at mining, at oil, at aerospace companies, everything. If you read the Mandiant report, it's very interesting because he was not able to get inside the building as such, but he got into the ecosystem around it. For example, how China Telecom was told by the government, lay down special fiber optic, like our BSNL and say Indian Army. Obviously, BSNL said, look, this guy is asking for too much. And they were told, look, this is a defense requirement. You will, don't ask questions, just do it. That paperwork they got. Okay. They got their staffing. What are the QRs? You need to have masters in linguistics or in communications or in these areas. You need to have this experience. That kind of stuff. They got their tasking. Which are the agencies in UK, US that you need to go after? And later on in subsidiary documentation, it came out, the tasking came from ministries in the government. Like the oil ministry says, okay, in US, I'm interested in these companies, these government departments. In UK, these companies, these government departments. So they got a tasking that way. A very strategic operation, obviously. What we look at is state-endorsed supported information warfare, a long drawn-out strategy. Acquisitions. Two very simple things. In 2015, China replaced US as the biggest tech acquisition country in 2015. And they did it mainly with acquisitions inside the US. Chip companies, robotic companies, special earth companies, VR. Right down to, we hear a lot about TikTok and how the US government finally stepped in and decided that their Committee on Foreign Investment in US, CFIUS is called, finally got some teeth and started saying, now we have retrospective effect. We are coming down on TikTok's this thing. It's because TikTok actually wasn't a big deal in the US. TikTok as Douyin was a big deal in China. It had relatively a low presence in US. But another company, Musical.ly, which is also a Chinese company, but with a very low domestic footprint, was pretty much popular with teenagers in the US. TikTok took over Musical.ly. And then immediately got a huge footprint overnight into the US market. Now, obviously, this had the blessings or it was prompted by the government behind. But suddenly, they had a huge social media footprint in the US. Right? So, those acquisitions are all strategic. It's not purely commercial. How they train and staff. Like Colonel Pavitran was showing about the universities. There are specific universities which are supported by the PLA Strategic Support Force, which is their cyber warfare force essentially. How they target, what infrastructure they get. All of it is drawn out from one unified strategy. And they see it as a critical area of redressing the imbalance. There's a very interesting 2020 presentation to the US this thing, House of Representatives. I don't know how much because it was not politically very correct. I don't know how much of it got accepted even in the US. But the strategist says very clearly, ki, look, it's not asymmetric warfare. It is not that the PLA and the US are coming head on. They are orthogonal. You are looking at, you know, supporting your technology and supporting your economy and now spying and everything. They are looking at, this is my national aim. If by chance you come in the way, they will ride roughshod over you. But otherwise, they are not really interested in cyber conflict. They are very clear, this is my national aim. I am going ahead on it. All these cyber capabilities happen to be one aspect of it. It is part of their national aim. And I believe this is the single, as that strategist said, this is the single largest reason for their success. That it forms a coherent part of the picture of their nation. Without it, you are heading nowhere. Right? You can just keep pumping money, but without a coherent effort, you are heading nowhere. And this is what I think Professor Kamakoti started by saying, and Colonel Pavitran has been saying. The problem is not China. The problem is our cyber security has threats and challenges because of our own failings. It's easy to blame China. But I'll give you two examples. One is from a very popular Tamil movie. I don't know how many of you know the rice pulling scam in reality. It was a big deal in India over the past decade. Anytime you have a half an hour free, I would recommend you Google and see it. It's highly entertaining and impossible to believe, but true. The guy who started that scam, he was asked, don't you feel guilty you cheated so many people of their money? He said, look, they were victims first. I came along to cheat them later. The essential part is they were victims with money and no coherent thought. So why are you blaming me? Ask them why they were victims. Right? The second thing is, 200-300 years ago, we say the Brits colonized India. You know who was in India the longest? The Portuguese. They were there from 1505 to 1961. The Brits dominated because of time, space, certain, you know, strategic actions. But at one point of time, we had the Danish, we had the Portuguese, we had the Brits, we had the French. If you go ahead of Pondicherry, there's Porto Novo. It was the Swedish East India Company's outpost. We had everybody competing because we were victims. Everybody who had anything to do with, you know, power came along because we were willing victims. Today, I see exactly the same thing. You can keep saying China, but actually the fact is we are victims first. I see the US jockeying for position. I see Israel trying to sell us cryptography. China, of course. Everybody. I don't see any reason why, you know, Batex is essentially worse than FAMG. If I have to choose, I'll rather actually take Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent than take Facebook, Apple, Amazon. You know, they are cheaper at least, if nothing else. If I have to be a slave, at least let me not pay money to become a slave. I mean, that's my personal viewpoint. Let us not say China. Let us say, what are we doing about our cyber security threats and challenges? Professor Kamakoti has been saying this for quite a while. A couple of years before, without naming the agency, I tagged along with Professor Kamakoti. He went and told a very sensitive agency in Delhi, okay, and I was there to translate. Every time I saw them dumbstruck, I stopped him and translated it into slightly easier terms to try and make them understand. Saying, hey, uncle, you have untrustworthy equipment because in medium short term, we are not going to get trustworthy equipment. We are working to try and see how we can give you some modicum of trust, some, way to work with this current untrustworthy equipment. And their reply was, no, but we are not taking China, no. We are taking Cisco Juniper. I was aghast at this. You really, I don't know why we have this preference for Goraskin. I would really prefer the Chinese. If somebody has to take over, I'd prefer the Chinese, yeah. I don't think I should be taken over by the Americans. This is the essential point which I wanted to reiterate, and I hope that this forum discusses it within themselves and takes it forward. That let us look within ourselves why we are victims, rather than how to defend against so and so offensive player, so and so offensive player. What my recommendations would be that first let us start looking at data localization in terms of how it benefits us, not in terms of what is optimal, what is best bang for the buck. No, look, if today Professor Kamakoti is unable to build a firewall which will give you 200 Gbps throughput, ask yourself, how many of your sensitive networks really require 200 Gbps throughput? Let us bite the bullet. Let us say, okay, sir, we are slower now because Professor Kamakoti's firewall cannot handle more than 200 Gbps. Fine. Let the government then give carrot, stick, whatever to Professor Kamakoti and try to get that 400 or 500 Gbps thing working. But bite the bullet. Say, I will not take a foreign firewall in the meantime. Bite that bullet, right? Have a long-term strategy. As far as roles and responsibilities go, everybody says we need to have, coherent action. Everybody is doing everything. I say, yaar, ye Bharatvarsha, it's good. Let 10 agencies do the same thing. No problem. No problem. But let us have a unified vision. Let us have a unified vision. Professor Kamakoti is developing a chip. IIT Bombay, that lab is developing a chip. CDAC is developing a chip. Good. Let us compete. Let us come out with it. Let us have a unified vision that tomorrow, if you are building a firewall for your nuclear agency, you will use a chip from one of these. That is where the unified vision comes. We try to keep doing empire building of one department at the cost of another by saying, no, I will be unilaterally controlling this. No. Let 10 people do it. Doesn't matter. Let's have the vision unified. And what can we do? Academia. The two examples that I gave, Shadows in the Cloud and Tracking the Ghostnet, whereby the Infowar Foundation, which operates from Monk School of Business, University of Toronto. This kind of research and effort cannot be done by industry. It has to be done by academia, supported by government. And the Mandiant report, Kevin Mandiant, is what industry does. Tracking threats to industry, to specific departments. And that again cannot be done by government. That has to be done by industry. And as Colonel Rajan pointed out, it is obviously Mandiant had and holds even today on his biodata what we call Tango Sir, a top secret clearance from the NSA. It's ridiculous to say that, say, Mr. Shroff or Professor Kamakoti has not worn a uniform and therefore I will not give him top secret clearance. You're at loss, not Professor Kamakoti or Mr. Shroff. You're not able to harness his expertise because of your stupid idea that you cannot trust him with a top secret clearance because of some 1932 Official Secrets Act. Start working towards getting niche industry. And finally, as both Professor Kamakoti and Colonel Rajan said, training and building capabilities. Unless we have that, let us see a very clear area where we have done this. We have done this in the finance sector. We have CA Act, we have CA training institutes, we have mandated corporate governance things. These audits will be done. We have consultancies, everything. Let's focus on it, learning lessons from what we have done earlier. As I said, this was more about reiterating whatever was there. Thanks, I'm through.
Okay. Thank you so much, Commander Prakash. I think it's refreshing to see a very different point of view, saying that whether really China is the problem or the fact that we don't have a vision and that is the problem. I think, yes, the fact that we don't have a cohesive vision like China has for the next 3 to 5 decades, I think that is where also a major problem lies. Before we open up the floor to questions, I just want to thank all my panelists, stupendous presentations, very different point of views, and I'm so grateful to all of you, to ensure that there is no overlap between what you have to present. So deeply, deeply appreciated. Bala, we can take the questions now if we still have time.
We are running short of time, but still we can just take a couple of questions from the chat box.
Yeah, so can you just curate? I mean, I think there have been quite a few, so can you just help us?
Yes. Okay. So the first question is by Rajaram sir to the panel. A few years back, the power grid in North India was brought on, which was widely attributed to a malware. How secure is the grid now? Have lessons been learned by both PSU and private players in India in this field?
Mr. Rajan, you want to take that?
Yeah, okay. So what I'm saying is from my point of view, although it's an informed point of view, because I interact with a lot of people from the power grid too. Actually, they have no method of identifying what is the problem, because their entire hardware and software are foreign. Okay, but they are not in a position to tell the truth to anyone. Okay, this is a sad fact. And has anything changed? No, nothing has changed.
Right. Thank you. Next question, Bala.
The next question is, how does one enforce unity in our opinion, policy, license conditions, promotion of Indian companies, including funding?
Commander Prakash, can I request you to address that?
Yeah. So unity of vision, as I said, if you see a totalitarian state like China, it's very clear. It comes from the topmost, not even the top, from the topmost. Mao says 4 modernizations. Hu Jintao says new historic missions. Xi Jinping's vision is encapsulated as Xi Jinping thought. It comes from the topmost, right? Then the rest all are just people who are amplifying and elaborating on it. In our country, our topmost political leadership, from an administrative and strategic viewpoint, we have the National Security Council, we have National Scientific Advisory Board, we have agencies which are supposed to be the interface between our top executive and the rest of the country. Let us have them, right? Everybody, whether it's me, whether it's Colonel Rajan, can only advise them. We can only recommend. The directive has to come from top. Let us not pretend that somebody like Ministry of IT or Ministry of Defense will actually have anything to do with an overarching strategy. They can look at their own areas. Hopefully, very candidly, I would not even be very confident of their having strategy in their own areas. They are barely able to keep up with day-to-day working. Right? Overarching vision has to come from somebody who's not doing day-to-day working. Somebody like the NSCS, somebody like the National Security Advisor, the principal scientific advisor to the government. It has to come from them. That's what I would say. All our industry think tanks, etc., we need to tell them. And though this overlaps with part of what I would like to speak later on in the afternoon, I would ask, we have agencies like this going on. we have Professor Goyal, we have Professor Kamakoti, etc. Why is then McKinsey or BCG advising our Niti Aayog? We don't have a strategy because McKinsey is advising them on strategy. The day Professor Goyal or Professor Kamakoti starts advising them on strategy, probably we'll have better results. Right?
Absolutely.